This is the Paul McGuire Report. I'm Paul McGuire. On today's program, we're going to continue discussing the signs of the times in terms of Bible prophecy being fulfilled in our world today at an accelerating rate. Now, I want to deal with Satanism, the occult, monarch mind control. I realize, I write books on this stuff, and it may appear to be contradictory, but I don't really find this stuff appealing. Part of it sickens me. In fact, it totally sickens me. So it's not something I do because, I'm looking for sensationalism. I would rather not do this stuff, okay? And a lot of you probably would rather not hear about it, but somebody's got to talk about it from a biblical standpoint because it is affecting our global culture and it has affected society since the fall of Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden, when Lucifer, which many people worship today, when Lucifer appeared to Eve in an erect reptilian form, the serpent of old, and seduced her, not sexually. He seduced her with his words and got her and Adam to reject God's word, and they activated the law of sin and death by disobeying God and eating from the fruit of the tree in the middle of the Garden of Eden. And at that moment, mankind and Adam and Eve lost their supernatural power that had been given to them by God to be overcomers and to rule and reign on planet Earth, not as gods, but as God's creation, as kind of the kings and queens of planet Earth. But they lost all of that supernatural power when they disobeyed the word of God by listening to Lucifer and activating the law of sin and death. Now, there's something that we need to know right then and there when we go back to the Garden of Eden, and that is we need to review clearly what God's word says about his intention, what he had in mind when he created man. And by man, I mean female and male, Adam and Eve. He had something in mind. They were created in the image of God, which means they had the DNA of God. They had many godlike attributes. Even today, sinful man has godlike attributes, but tragically, he is ruled by a fallen nature. So when God planned for Adam and Eve to have the supernatural authority to rule and reign over planet Earth as kings and queens, they were the rulers of the Garden of Eden and Earth. But when they disobeyed God's word, they activated the law of sin and death, and at that moment, they lost their supernatural authority to rule and reign. Now, that's critical to understand, because Satanism, Luciferianism, witchcraft, the occult, is all an attempt to give sinful man back some of that supernatural power of ruling and reigning, except it comes with a cost. You have to sell your soul to Satan. And ultimately, Jesus Christ is King of Kings and Lord of Lords, so his power is the greatest. Now, these ancient occult societies, at the very core, were centers of satanic and Luciferian worship. And they passed on the total control system, the matrix, if you will, from generation to generation, empire to empire, through a whole series of secret occult societies. And today, we see the proliferation of Satanism and Luciferianism as never before. I mean, it's always been rampant in royal families and places of power, but in the music industry, especially, in certain areas of media, and among other groups, Satanism, worshiping Lucifer, is far more pervasive than the average person realizes. And the point is that if you are a parent or a grandparent, whether you like it or not, your children's minds and the minds of their friends and the minds of young adults are being influenced and shaped and seduced by satanic messages, the embedding of satanic principles and teachings, the role modeling of superstars who are privately Satanists. It's all over the music industry. And it's disturbing when you understand, and most parents don't understand this. Most Christian parents don't understand this. They see the lewd behavior. They see the overtly sexual lyrics and the overtly sexual performances, and they understand that is a corrupting influence. But they don't always, the average parent doesn't always understand the subtle nuances, the subtle symbols, the subtle references, the subtle hand gestures, and a whole assortment of things that are really secret signals being communicated to your children, who do know what, oftentimes they do know what these hand signals mean, etc. They're communicating to the world and to your children that they're Satanists, that they worship Satan. Now let's take Miley Cyrus. Miley Cyrus is a very interesting personality. And what I'm about to say, I'm not saying that everything I'm going to say about Miley Cyrus, I'm going to distinguish between what is fact and what is hypothesis or conjecture on my part, okay? First of all, we have to understand that getting the real facts about whether or not a person is a Satanist and what exactly they do as a Satanist is practically impossible unless you become a Satanist and penetrate the group, which I have no intention of doing. So you can't say, well, I have conclusive proof. So you always have to qualify what you're saying if you want to have integrity in your research. But let's talk about Miley Cyrus, because at the very least, just from her visual images, etc., she is communicating things that would, at the very least, lead one to question whether or not she's into the occult or Satanism. But it's not only Miley Cyrus, it's a whole series of musical superstars. And she had another personality, I guess, which was Hannah Montana. And I'm looking at a picture of Miley Cyrus when she was young and Hannah Montana when she was young. And they're like polar opposites in terms of personality. And what prompted this discussion was a number of things. My knowledge and research regarding Satanism and scientific mind control. And by the way, Satanism and scientific mind control go hand in hand. The Nazi mind control scientists that were brought into the United States after World War II under Operation Paperclip were Satanists and occultists, as well as mind control scientists. The Third Reich, Hitler's political party, was an occult party first, a political party second, and Hitler himself was demon-possessed and a practitioner of the occult, and all of his highest generals and commanders and advisors were all part of deep, dark German occult secret societies and satanic societies. So, Miley Cyrus, like many of these other both actresses and singers and stuff. There's an entire montage of let's say question marks, inconsistencies in their life. Now, I was watching The View. I had been watching The View, I guess, quite a few times in the last 3 months. And that's that big music show, okay, where people perform all kinds of music, country, rock and roll, pop, rap, hip hop, whatever. And it's a very popular show, and they have, big, highly respected musical superstars being the judges of this talent contest, which has massive ratings. And Miley Cyrus has been on the program, I don't know how long, for at least a month or so. And she's presenting herself in an entirely different image than she did in her rock concerts, where she was running around half nude, behaving pornographically, doing all kinds of obscene gestures with her tongue, and how she positioned herself physically. I mean, it was not suggestive, would be an understatement. It was like highly, highly suggestive of pornographic type material. All right. But now she's changed her image, and she looks more like the young, upcoming, a little bit more mainstream pop megastar. And she's obviously a very bright woman, very intelligent woman, coming from a music family. Okay, so Miley Cyrus, she made it big time. She comes from a musical family, Billy Ray Cyrus, the male country music star. And she herself has said, what's her name? Dolly Parton is her godmother or something. So she grew up in the center of the country music business. And her many performances were highly vulgar. I'm not going to even verbally depict what is going on in her musical performances, but they were highly vulgar. And the question I kept asking myself, and I didn't ask it just from nowhere, I had read things which caused me to question. And one of the things, and again, I'm not making an allegation, I'm simply making an observation. And the question would be, based on the behavior I've seen among a disturbingly high percentage of the very top superstars in the music industry, male and female, they appear to be involved in various cults, occult activity, and in some cases, witchcraft and Satanism, a spectrum of occult activities. But one common denominator that appears to emerge from the behavior, from their lifestyles, etc., is one could justifiably ask the question, are they victims of monarch mind control? Or, from an occultic definition, are they victims of satanic ritual abuse? Because SRA, satanic ritual abuse, in many cases is very similar to monarch mind control. Now, monarch mind control and mind control and the occult and satanic origins of mind control and how it fits into Bible prophecy and how we can have supernatural victory over those forces is one of the major themes in my brand new book, Conquering the Matrix. Because I began to realize that the vast majority of people and the vast majority of Christians had absolutely no clue whatsoever as to what is an epidemic in, let's say, the musical pop culture. So I go into detail about monarch mind control, how the actual techniques that they use step by step to program a person under monarch mind control, the history of it, where it came from, etc., what it's used for. And you know what? In today's world, you need to have at least a basic understanding of this stuff. Because when you look at the careers of people like Lady Gaga, you see, again, this echo chamber effect. Because, again, these are, I'm not even making allegations. I'm asking questions. You see in Lady Gaga what you see in so many of these superstars, and that is what I would call the signatures, the subtle little signatures of what could be the fact that they were victims of monarch mind control. And the same would be true of Beyoncé, who has this alternate personality that is somewhat demonic in my opinion. Sasha Fierce. Eminem, he has his alternate personality, Slim Shady. Nicki Minaj's Roman Zelensky. Many questions about monarch mind control. Now, I want you to get kind of a grip and fasten your seatbelt here, because if you've never gone through this material, I mean, it's like Ozzy Osbourne, the satanic rock and roll heavy metal band. All right, its song "Crazy Train," and I don't know what the stupid lyrics are of "Crazy Train" is, but I think if the lyrics say something like, you know, this crazy train, he's speaking of his life and all that stuff, you know, is ready to go off the tracks. And looking at the music industry and asking questions on monarch mind control and going through the history of it is like riding a crazy train ready to go off the tracks, except for the fact that if you're born again and you have faith in Jesus Christ, you're not going off. You're not going to get on any crazy train, and you're not going to go off the tracks. But you have to look at the evidence, the historical evidence, because this is far bigger than what you think it is. It's a global planetary methodology of total control that originated in ancient Babylon in an occult Luciferian control system or template known as Mystery Babylon. Now, let's just look at some of this stuff, okay? In my book, A Prophecy of the Future of America, which, again, is completely different than the other book, A Prophecy of the Future of America, 2016-2017. In A Prophecy of the Future of America, I deal with, yes, MK-Ultra, Nazi mind control, the occult, etc., the occult secret societies like the Illuminati, Skull and Bones, Bilderberg Group, Bohemian Grove, Rosicrucians, Aleister Crowley's OTO, and on and on and on. And when I saw that this big singer, Nicki Minaj, she's singing about Roman Zelensky. I mean, I recognized immediately that Roman Zelensky was her the deliberate misspelling of a famous big-time Hollywood film director called Roman Polanski, who was supposed to be a hardcore practicing Satanist. His wife, Sharon Tate, a beautiful actress model, she was supposed to be a practicing Satanist. And it was the Charles Manson family that broke into Sharon Tate's house in one of the elite Hollywood Hills enclaves. And the Manson family broke in there and supposedly slaughtered everybody that was there. in a bloodbath and wrote like the words piggies and other dark things in blood on the walls. And then, even though Sharon Tate, the actress, her stomach revealed she was pregnant, this satanic family, the Manson family, slit her belly open and killed her baby and killed her. And it was one of the most brutal murders in America and the history of California. So why is Nicki Minaj even aware of who Roman Polanski is? Because Roman Polanski, I'm just guessing, is like 40 years 40 years earlier than Nicki Minaj. Why would she know all about Roman Polanski or Roman Polanski? Why is she obsessed? Because there's a satanic connection there. Okay? So she's singing in detail about Roman Polanski, who was supposed to be a Satanist, and in that she's giving away all these occultic, satanic secrets and messages. And I want to explain to you what they are. And your kids, by the way, are listening to these lyrics over and over and over again in a repetitive, hypnotic manner. So let me read you what this Illuminati imagery and satanic symbolism in the music industry is all about. Because I think you're going to see that this is not some weird thing. It's a very, very serious spiritual battle that Jesus Christ predicted would happen in the last days. And we are in, prophetically, the last days. By the way, you're listening to the Paul McGuire Report. I'm Paul McGuire. We're going to hold tomorrow, November 17th, a Paradise Mountain church meeting in North Hollywood where I'll give a special message on Bible prophecy, current events, where America's going, where the world is going, and how you can have supernatural hope for not only this nation, but for your life if you will draw close to God. So join me at the Paradise Mountain Church meeting. Now, all of the meetings are free, but you have to pre-register for security reasons, and you need to read the map, etc., and the instructions. So go to paulmcguire.us. You can pre-register, and you ought to prayerfully bring a friend or friends that the Lord puts on your heart to join you. And the Lord has given me a powerful message from his prophetic word. And there will be a time of personal ministry where I'll lay hands and pray on anybody who chooses to be prayed for. We will pray for America through intercessory prayer warfare. And we're believing God to turn this spiritual battle in our nation around. And I believe that the Lord Jesus Christ, through his Holy Spirit, is calling you to be there. And when I say you, those of you who know, who are mature enough in the Lord to know that God's calling you to be with us, to join with us. And it's simple to do. All you have to do, assuming you live within reasonable proximity. Some people come from unreasonable proximity. To drive to the meeting, but go to paulmcguire.us to get the instructions to register. The presence of the Lord will be in the room. Again, people will be prayed for and ministered for. God moves and supernaturally sets people free. And it's a powerful time in the Lord. And you're not going to leave down. You're going to leave charged up, and you're going to have an acute sense that God is moving powerfully on your behalf. And people need that. It's breakthrough. So join me tomorrow. Go to paulmcguire.us. All right. Also, you can get yourself a copy of Conquering the Matrix at paulmcguire.us, and you can get a copy of A Prophecy of the Future of America and other related books at paulmcguire.us. So In the book, in my book, A Prophecy of the Future of America, page 304, the chapter. Well, let's read. Actually, let's read. This is because Charles Manson is supposedly on his deathbed and dying for some weird reason yesterday. Don't ask me how this happened. I was posting an announcement for our meeting on Facebook, and all of a sudden, Charles Manson's website or news site pops up and dominates my entire computer screen. Don't ask me how it happened. I have no idea how it happened. And then I read that he was very sick and dying. And so, I just felt led to email him. I don't know if the email will even get to him. But I just briefly shared with him the fact that no matter what he's done in this life, that if he'll come to Jesus Christ sincerely and ask for forgiveness of his sins, that it's still not too late to join Christ in heaven. If he'll come to Jesus, ask for forgiveness of sins, and ask him for Charles Manson to ask the Lord to make him born again. So pray that man does come to Christ, because he was a victim, I believe, of Monarch mind control. Okay, so we're going to tie in Charles Manson. And the weird thing is that I just came across this like by accident yesterday. But Charles Manson had a lot of interesting knowledge and information that most people don't have access to. A lot of people just try to dismiss him as flat out crazy. He's not flat out crazy. He plays the game of being flat out crazy, so people will leave him alone. He's not crazy. He may not be educated formally, with a college degree, but he knows a lot, okay, about the way the world really works. Tragically, he serves Satan. Now, he is a Satanist, and why this obsession with him by people like Nicki Minaj singing a song called Roman Zolanski, which is based on Roman Polanski, who was supposedly a Satanist. His wife, Sharon Tate, was a Satanist, and the Manson family in that bloody murder slaughtered Sharon Tate, Polanski's wife, who was pregnant. So on page 302 of A Prophecy of the Future of America, I'll just read it to you. Tragically, the crazed hippie cult leader Charles Manson, who some say was a practicing Satanist, had his followers commit the brutal murders in Sharon Tate's home in 1969. Manson claimed that the Beatles' White Album was communicating a subliminal message about an apocalyptic race war that he named Helter Skelter after the Beatles song. Charles Manson and his followers, called the Family, were doing acid and practicing free love on the deserted Myers Ranch near Death Valley, California, where cowboy movies used to be filmed. Manson heard coded messages from the White Album while on drugs and gave his private interpretation of the Book of Revelation. Manson believed that he and his followers would escape the chaos through a hole that went deep under the ground in Death Valley into another world until Helter Skelter was over. As reported in the book Helter Skelter, the story of the Manson murders by Vincent Bugliosi and Kurt Gentry, they say, quote, in the 1970 trial for the Tate La Bianca murders, Charles Manson testified privately as to the meaning of Helter Skelter. It means confusion, literally. It doesn't mean war with anyone. It doesn't mean that some people are going to kill other people. Helter Skelter is confusion. Manson continues. Is it a conspiracy that the music is telling the youth to rise up against the establishment because the establishment is rapidly destroying things? Is that a conspiracy? The music speaks to you every day, but you are too deaf, dumb, and blind to even listen to the music. It is not my conspiracy. It is not my music. I hear what it relates. It says rise. It says kill. Why blame it on me? I didn't write the music. Obviously, not everyone is going to hear the coded messages of race wars in music, but we live in a culture where a lot of people are teetering on the edge psychologically. Images and messages that stir up racial violence can easily lead to race wars and then to class wars. Is that their purpose? I believe it is. Jesus Christ specifically warned that one of the signs of the last days would be race wars. Quote, "For nation will rise against nation, and kingdom against kingdom, and there will be famines, pestilences, and earthquakes in various places. All these things are the beginning of sorrows." Matthew 24, 7-8. The word nation actually comes from the Greek word ethnos, which means ethnic or race. Jesus Christ was warning that in the last days there would be race wars. Now, that's from page 304 of A Prophecy of the Future of America. Then I continue. Charles Manson was a practicing Satanist and followed many of Aleister Crowley's teachings. Manson's bizarre murders appear to have been satanic rituals and not unlike the rituals depicted in the film Rosemary's Baby. Ironically, Roman Polanski directed Rosemary's Baby. That the plot had to do with a woman who discovers there's a satanic cult living in this apartment building in Manhattan. And I haven't seen the movie, but from what I've read, the satanic cult has her supernaturally impregnated to give birth to some kind of antichrist demon seed baby. Okay? Illuminati mind control appears to be alive and well in the music industry, and the songs and images your kids are watching. Nicki Minaj made her Grammy performance a tribute to the demonic spirit that is inside of her, whose name is Roman Zelensky. So why does this female singer, Nicki Minaj, I don't know how old she is, but I'm guessing the whole Manson thing, the whole Roman Polanski thing, happened, 40 years before Nicki Minaj wrote this song or whatever. It's a 40-year-old thing. Nicki Minaj is not 40 years old. Okay, so why does she reach way back in time to obsess with this thing? Well, I'll tell you why. This is what I wrote in A Prophecy of the Future of America. Nicki Minaj made her Grammy performance a tribute to the demonic spirit that is inside of her, whose name is Roman Zelensky. What is interesting about this is that Roman Zelensky is clearly a reference to the Roman Polanski who directed the 1969 movie Rosemary's Baby. This was about 40 years before Minaj and the generation of her audience. Minaj shows a film clip of what looks like her being possessed, and the stage show resumes with Minaj shackled to a wooden board, signifying that she has become so insane from the spirit in her that she needed to be restrained. Then Minaj sings these strange lyrics. Take your medication, Roman. Take a short vacation, Roman. You'll be okay. You need to know your station, Roman. Some alterations on your clothes and your brains. Take a little break. Take a little break. And then I write, this is very dark and demonic stuff, especially when you add to it the X-rated edge to her album, Roman Reloaded. When you go back to the history of the film director, Roman Polanski, you discover a lot of very evil stuff. And then I continue to write in a subchapter entitled Rosemary's Baby, Babylon Working, and the Homonucleus Moonchild Ritual. On August 9th, 1969, actress Sharon Tate and 4 others were brutally killed. Sharon Tate, who was the wife of the film director Roman Polanski, was stabbed to death with her unborn child in her stomach, and the murderers smeared her blood on the wall to write the words from that Beatles song, Helter Skelter, which were the words of the Beatles song written the year before from their album Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band. And on the cover of the album, there were pictures of numerous and historical people, including the famous Satanist Aleister Crowley, who also happened to be the head of the OTO cult in Pasadena, California, whose leading member was Jack Parsons, the famous rocket scientist. The Charlie Manson cult, called The Family, apparently murdered Sharon Tate. Roman Polanski had directed Rosemary's Baby, a movie about a demonic moonchild. Why is the name Roman Polanski in songs that are sung by Minaj, who seems to call him Roman Zelensky? In the satanic cult OTO's Ninth Degree, details are given regarding the creation of a moonchild or a homonucleus via demonic possession of the fetus following ritualized sex. The satanic ritual came from the Old Testament accounts of when the B'nai Elohim, or the fallen angels, had sex with human women who conceived the hybrid species called the Nephilim, which was the mixture of a demonic and human DNA. Southern California OTO leader Jack Parsons, whose OTO lodge was directly connected to Aleister Crowley, was connected to Hollywood. As the story goes, Jack Parsons tried to create a moonchild in the 1940s with the Babylon working ritual. The feature film Rosemary's Baby, directed by Roman Polanski, was thought to be a graphically symbolic and cinematic enactment of a homonucleus ritual on film. Allegedly, Roman Polanski and Sharon Tate were friends of Anton LaVey, the founder of the Church of Satan. Some say they were members of the satanic cult. In the movie Rosemary's Baby, a young woman is manipulated by her own husband and a satanic cult to enter a ritual to the father of the Antichrist. Supposedly, all the rituals and symbols in the film are based on actual satanic ceremonies. The film was shot in the Dakota Building in New York City, where John Lennon would later be shot by David Chapman. John Lennon supposedly talked about his belief in the teachings of Aleister Crowley, and John Lennon was a friend to Roman and Sharon Tate Polanski. So I just want to stop there, because if you knew the Beatles and all this stuff, it has a lot of meaning to you. And even young people who Minaj, it has a lot of meaning to. Notice that this film, now think of a satanic cult. And notice that this film about the satanic cult, Rosemary's Baby, was filmed in the Dakota Building, which is an elegant, classical, tall building overlooking Central Park in Manhattan. But it's where John Lennon, coming out of that building, would later be shot by David Chapman. Now, I want to stop right there. David Chapman, nobody knows the truth, but David Chapman mysteriously appears and he pulls out a gun. He's been waiting for John Lennon for a while. And as John Lennon exits his apartment building, David Chapman kills John Lennon mysteriously. But it's odd because observers observed Lennon's murderer, David Chapman, which I believe comes from a big political family. His behavior, David Chapman's behavior, was noted as odd, like he was in a trance state. And some suggested he may have been under scientific mind control. He may have been programmed to kill John Lennon. He may have been like a Manchurian candidate. We'll never know for certain, but there are a lot of people who think that. Now, notice that John Lennon admits his belief in the teachings of Aleister Crowley, the great Satanist. And for those of you that are familiar with the Sgt. Pepper Lonely Hearts Club Band album cover, there's a picture of a lot of famous people on the album cover, and there's a picture of the great Satanist Aleister Crowley right on the Beatles album cover. So John Lennon also claimed he was a friend to Roman and Sharon Tate Polanski. So here we know that John Lennon, from other research I've done, was deeply into the occult because although he denounced a belief in the biblical God, he practiced the teachings of the occult sleeping prophet, Edgar Cayce. And here we read that he believes in the teachings of the great Satanist Aleister Crowley. And then to confirm that at the very least he has a passionate interest in Satanism, John Lennon was a friend to Roman and Sharon Tate Polanski, who many believe were hardcore Satanists. Shortly after the release of the movie Rosemary's Baby, Polanski's wife Sharon Tate was supposedly killed by the orders of Satanist Charles Manson, who some speculate may have been under Monarch mind control. 7 years later, Roman Polanski fled the U.S. after being charged with the rape of a 13-year-old girl named Samantha, which he gave a drug to or something. And I won't get into the details. And he was in, I think, don't quote me on it, I believe this event occurred in the home of Jack Nicholson, the big actor. Now, I'm not saying Nicholson had anything to do with it. There's no evidence of that. In fact, I don't even think he was in his home. But that's where this crime occurred. And Polanski, for this crime of raping a 13-year-old girl, has been outlawed from the United States for like 40 years. He's trying to come back in. I think they're turning him down. Okay, so 7 years later, after making 7 years later, after raping this girl, Polanski fled the United States for Europe and has not officially returned. Now, in this book, A Prophecy of the Future of America, I asked the question, there are a lot of satanic connections going on, and a big question is, why would Minaj be in touch with a demon inside of herself named Roman Zelensky? So then I have another sub-chapter title, Satanic Connections, Monarch Mind Control, Hip-Hop, and Your Children. Your children, and wake up, mothers and fathers and older brothers and sisters and grandmothers and stuff. This isn't paranoid conspiracy stuff. This isn't hidden. Just watch their videos and their interviews. Do some Google searches. Now, I'm reading you a number of artists here, and you say, well, time moves quickly, so you may say, well, my children aren't into these artists. Well, guess what? Whatever artists your children are into, let's say they're from an even younger generation, I guarantee you a significant percentage of these artists on the top are involved in the occult, Satanism, and other such things, and may also be a product of Monarch mind control. I write, your children are being targeted by musical performers like Lady Gaga, Minaj, Beyoncé, Madonna, and others who are using satanic symbols that allude to Monarch mind control. Lady Gaga performs using all kinds of Illuminati symbolism, what could be references to mind control. The hip-hop artist Beyoncé refers to her demonic alter ego, whose name is Sasha Fierce, and when she is in the mental state of Sasha, she performs with an X-rated style and wears the satanic Baphomet symbol. I mean, you know, what do you need? A giant neon sign that says, I sold my soul to the devil? Who is trying to reach? Now, this is a question I asked in the book, but it's important. Who is trying to reach into your children's minds with satanic mind control? Why are the people you trust to lead you and guide you not warning and teaching you about a demonic force that is trying to steal your child's heart and soul? And I continue to go on into this in great detail in this book, A Prophecy of the Future of America. I get into Aleister Crowley. I get into L. Ron Hubbard, connecting with Jack Parsons, the rocket scientist. I get into the teachings of Dr. John Dee, who worked with Sir Francis Bacon in the 1600s, and they planned for America to be head of the New World Order and the New Atlantis, and how these Babylon working rituals began with Dr. Dee, the spiritual advisor of the Queen of England in the 1600s. And I talk about Parsons and the Jet Propulsion Laboratory. And it gets weirder. It's so weird. If you didn't do the research yourself, you might just think it's like, this is like crazy time, okay? So, in my book, A Prophecy of the Future of America, I talk about, I have a subchapter called Oblivion. That's the Tom Cruise sci-fi movie. Oblivion, Tom Cruise, and the Illuminati. Now, people think that the movie Oblivion, which stars the Scientologist Tom Cruise, is about a revolution against the Illuminati. Because in this film, the elites, the globalist elites, live off-world. Okay, that's a key thing. In the movie Elysium with Matt Damon, the elites, the super wealthy, live off-world. They've built for themselves a kind of paradise in the form of a giant orbiting technological planet that orbits around the Earth, and therefore they're safe from the masses on planet Earth, and they live in safety and protection until the Matt Damon character hijacks a rocket to their artificial paradise and disrupts things. Okay. In Oblivion, the elites live off-world, and the masses that survive some kind of great war, they're forced to live in a desert-like post-apocalyptic world. And then there's this gigantic alien spaceship in the movie called the Tetrad, which is a pyramid starship. Now notice the word tetrad is a pyramid-shaped starship. This is critical because the pyramid is a blatantly occult symbol, and it's a symbol of the Illuminati. The interesting symbolism is the Illuminati pyramid on the back of the US dollar is a power structure with a base at the bottom and a tiny pyramid on the top. So, in Oblivion, the elite are orbiting safely above a burned out planet. Now, this is what I want you to zero in on. This stuff's going to blow your mind. And it's important because this is how you decode the matrix. This is why I wrote my book, Conquering the Matrix. They interrelate. Now, on page 313 of A Prophecy of the Future of America, I write, Illuminati Plan, Underground Cities and Operation Doomsday. So in this chapter of the book, I talk about the fact that all across America, there are massive underground cities, underground military bases, underground cities that can withstand a nuclear attack, and they're in Russia, and they're in China, and they're all over the United States, etc., etc. Because the elite in all these nations have secretly built for themselves underground worlds to live in if all, an Armageddon type scenario happens on the surface of planet Earth. So, here's the key thing to understand. These underground cities, and in addition to the underground cities, it has been alleged and claimed by people, and I can't verify it, but that there are countless gigantic military bases deep, deep, deep under the ground of the Earth's surface, and in the lower chambers of these top secret military underground bases are all kinds of Nephilim DNA breeding with animals and humans experimentation, Monarch mind control experimentation, and other really weird stuff. But notice the fact these underground cities, and many of them are out there in the desert where these military bases are. They're in remote desert regions. And supposedly there's a lot of mind control programming going on. Now, this is what I want you to do in order to connect the dots. Charles Manson, the media portrays him as a nut and basically says, don't listen to him. He's just, just completely wacko, all right? But in his songs, in his talking, he constantly makes reference to things such as these underground secret military bases. Now, I want to stop for a moment and show you the direct correlation, the dots that connect from these pop musical superstars and their lyrics that your kids are listening to Satanism, Charles Manson, to these underground bases. Look, I know it sounds like this is just like weird Twilight Zone talk, but it isn't. There's a very clear picture that emerges if you study it carefully. And that means you have to weed out some of the crazy stuff. But there's something to be discovered here that I believe the Lord wants us to discover. You're listening to the Paul McGuire Report. I'm Paul McGuire. Visit paulmcguire.us. Okay, let's go back to Charles Manson, who, by the way, I don't know, he had a really bad childhood. He was like in detention center schools, reform schools, most of his life, and prisons most of his life. And then he was hanging around Hollywood, and he became close with the Beach Boys, and he began to provide a steady supply of drugs for the Beach Boys parties, and supposedly lots of girls, okay? And that got him into the inner Hollywood elite circles. So Manson, in fact, I was doing editing on one of my DVDs. I think it was American Dictatorship. And I went to the editing studio, which was in, I think, Woodland Hills. And I was talking to the editor, and we began talking about a bunch of stuff. And he told me that he actually was the engineer on Charles Manson's album that Charlie Manson was recording. And he told me like personal stories about Charles Manson, and it was weird. But one thing he said is Charles Manson was not as crazy as you thought. He knew a lot of things, he said. Okay, so in my book, Prophecy of the Future of America, I'm talking about Charles Manson, and then I talk about the fact, now listen carefully, this is mind-blowing. I write, Manson claimed that the Beatles' White Album was communicating a subliminal message about an apocalyptic race war that he termed Helter Skelter, after the Beatles' song. And then I write, Charles Manson and his followers called the family were doing acid and practicing free love on the deserted Myers Ranch near Death Valley, California, where cowboy movies used to be filmed. And I think it's relatively near some military installation. This is what Manson claimed. Manson heard coded messages from the White Album while he was on drugs. Okay, now just mark that in your brain. Manson believed that he and his followers would escape the chaos through a hole that went deep under the ground in Death Valley into another world until Helter Skelter was over. Okay? So, let's start here. Now, if you take my book, Conquering the Matrix, which is, it's a fast-moving, easy to read, but it'll stretch you, book that exposes the reality of scientific mind control, brainwashing, programming people by an occult elite, and how this fits into Bible prophecy, how these original brainwashing techniques were developed in ancient mystery Babylon and ancient occult secret societies, how the Bible talks about them and warns about them in the accounts of Daniel, where Daniel was surrounded with real magicians, real sorcerers, real clairvoyants, and Joseph, who was the advisor to Pharaoh, he advised Pharaoh in a court that was filled with real sorcerers, real magicians, real astrologers, and Daniel was advising the king of Babylon. But these sorcerers and magicians weren't playtime, Las Vegas acts. They were the real thing, because if they didn't produce accurate supernatural projections, etc., these emperors would kill them. Okay, they were the real deal. The Bible never says that these occult people didn't have real power. All right? So, the occult still advises our military and the world today, because it's part of the world system. Now, when you read about Charles Manson, he is now, in this interview, well, before we get into the interview, he's talking about the Beatles' White Album, where he claims, while he's listening to it on LSD or whatever, he's hearing, Manson claims he's hearing subliminal messages from the Beatles' White Album, specifically their song Helter Skelter, which he says is really about an apocalyptic race war that he named Helter Skelter after the Beatles song. And what's interesting here is a couple of things. Many researchers have theorized that Charles Manson himself went through an MK mind control program or a Monarch mind control program of some sort. Now, I can't prove that, all right? But in my books, privately, and what I'm saying now, it has been my personal speculation that there's a high probability that Manson really did go through a scientific mind control program like MK Ultra or Monarch mind control, because of the various things that he says. You see, so this satanic cult leader, could he have been programmed to be a satanic cult leader through Monarch mind control or MK Ultra? Remember, if you look at the story of the Jim Jones cult and many of these other really whacked out, crazy, suicidal, drug-taking, orgy, satanic type cults and stuff, there are numerous reports, and again, no one can prove it conclusively because you can't even verify if the so-called legitimate witnesses are legitimate to begin with. But people have said that many of these cults and even what I would call the soft cults, like possibly Werner Erhard's Est, the motivational group, were actually birthed through intelligence agencies, secret intelligence agency programs, all right, that utilize Monarch mind control, Manchurian Candidate, MK Ultra mind control. All right? Now, this all sounds weird, but remember, L. Ron Hubbard is also mentioned in my book because he happens to be at Jack Parsons' mansion in Pasadena, which is an Aleister Crowley OTO lodge. What was Hubbard doing there? Hubbard was the first man in the world, as far as I know, who came forth publicly and exposed scientific mind control and brainwashing being used by governments around the world. And it was L. Ron Hubbard, who was a science fiction author and later the founder of Scientology. And I'm not a Scientologist. I don't believe in Scientology principles. But make no mistake about it, Hubbard was a genius. And he knew things, okay, that other people didn't know. He got that information from somewhere. So when Hubbard wrote his book, now here connect the dots with me here. Hubbard is in the OTO, the Aleister Crowley cult mansion, owned by Jack Parsons, the famous rocket scientist after which Jet Propulsion Laboratories is named. Jack Parsons just happens to be close buddies with a man named Wernher von Braun, who was a Nazi rocket scientist brought into the U.S. secretly, and Wernher von Braun established NASA and put our rocket program into high gear. But Wernher von Braun was also a Nazi mind control scientist. And Wernher von Braun was good friends with Jack Parsons, who was Aleister Crowley's disciple and ran the OTO Lodge in Pasadena, where L. Ron Hubbard was supposedly there. Now, L. Ron Hubbard, it turns out, among his other abilities and giftings, he's the first person who publicly exposes the basic techniques of scientific mind control. And he says, all scientific mind control comes about through, and these are Hubbard's words, pain, drugs, hypnosis. Pain, drugs, hypnosis. That's L. Ron Hubbard, who wrote a book, I believe, the Brainwashing Manual, exposing Russian brainwashing, communist brainwashing techniques, mind control techniques. Now, remember that it was the Nazi mind control scientists in Nazi Germany under Hitler who began the world's first and most powerful and advanced scientific mind control system. Remember that the Nazi scientists were also Satanists. They specialized in rocketry, genetics, and mind control. They developed a mind control program called MK Ultra, which used the powerful drug LSD. It used shock, pain, torture, LSD, and hypnosis. What is hypnosis? Hypnosis is putting somebody into a trance state, programming them through repetitive words, subliminal messages, repetitive symbols. And Huxley said over and over again, the key to mind control is repetition, playing messages when people are asleep, playing messages subliminally. Are you tracking with me here? And also, the Nazi mind control scientists are Satanists. They're practicers of the occult. So they use LSD on soldiers and others for experimentation. They subject their victims to intense psychological pain, shock, and trauma. Okay, I won't get into the abominations people had to experience physically, but let's just call it ultra pain. That disorients the entire psychological system and it just cracks your brain wide open, so you can be programmed. And then they did this while people were on powerful psychedelic drugs like LSD. And then they would continue the process with sleep deprivation, keeping them up for weeks at a time and playing recorded subliminal messages over and over again through hypnosis and other methods of inducing a hypnotic state. One method would be to put them in an isolated room or something, or solitary confinement where they could hear nothing, they couldn't see light, they'd have no human contact, and just being isolated like that for months at a time would cause people to hallucinate, put them in a trance. So the combination of these factors would program people to be Manchurian candidates, activated by trigger words, who would act as assassins, like in the movie The Manchurian Candidate, the first one with Frank Sinatra and the second one with Denzel Washington. And you have so many Manchurian Candidate, MK Ultra spin-off movies and television shows. I mean, there must be 50 of them going on right now. You have movies like The Bourne Identity. It's all based on MK Ultra mind control programming. Mel Gibson's Conspiracy Theory, based on MK Ultra programming. You have all these TV shows and all these movies with, what's her name? Brad Pitt, Angelina Jolie. She's like Salt. She's a programmed super soldier. All these super soldier films, and there's so many super soldier films and TVs. They're enhanced. They're super soldiers. But they don't tell you that the super soldier is produced through scientific mind control. All right, that's occultic. Now, they bring the 10,000 Nazi rocket scientists here into the United States, and then they supercharge the mind control program. It comes in phases, okay, and they all have different names of the phases. Then they develop Monarch mind control. That's what they appear to be using on all these musical superstars and celebrities. Under Monarch mind control, you use intense pain, brutality, rape, abuse, and shock. You use powerful drugs like LSD, sleep deprivation, and then you program, hypnotize, and use repetition, sleep deprivation in the process. And the way the Monarch mind control process works is this. First, you induce such astronomical pain that the pain becomes so overwhelming that you literally shatter the victim's personality into countless numbers of separate personalities, or what they call alternate personalities. In other words, when the human mind and identity is subject to such overwhelming pain and shock, the only way that the biological, psychological system of a person can remain somewhat intact is to split into multiple personalities from which, well, I don't want to go there because it requires too much explanation. And then through the use of drugs or hypnosis or whatever, and occult and satanic elements, you program these people to have multiple personalities. And sometimes demons are deliberately placed in these people because the people involved in the programming process are Satanists. And now you have a Monarch mind control person, and they can't remember the fact that they were put under mind control because they use electroshock therapy to literally create amnesia walls so that they can't remember their programming. Now, let's move forward. And I explain all of this in Conquering the Matrix. I explain the process, examples of the process historically. So now we look at all these singers and stuff. Okay, let's just review just a few. All right. Prominent music figures, they're all embracing their so-called second self or their alternate personality. Sounds like Monarch mind control to me, doesn't it? Beyonce, she has a secondary personality or a second self called Sasha Fierce. And Sasha Fierce is like animalistic, totally unrestricted sexuality, and her whole face changes and contorts like she's possessed with this demon, okay? Eminem, he has this second self. Slim Shady is his alter personality. Nicki Minaj's Roman Zelensky. Roman Zelensky is her alternate personality. Lady Gaga has Joe Calderon as her alternate personality. And then my question is, have they been programmed by a high-level scientific mind control system that incorporates Satanism to manifest personalities that will deliberately lead our youth into sexual immorality, perversion, Satanism, and embracing the occult and the Illuminati? Are they programmed? Now I'm going to ask you a question that goes even deeper, and I can't give you a definitive answer. But from my research over the years, it appears, and I'm not making a definitive statement, but it appears these things can often run in families or parts of families or relatives, that the people selected just aren't randomly selected, but they have a family connection, that this kind of programming may have occurred before under satanic ritual abuse or whatever. And so that you have people in the family or connected to the family that are also under this thing. And in their altars, they often will use born-again evangelical Christians. Now, I'm not making an allegation, okay? I'm not saying that these parents are Satanists or are under Monarch mind control. I'm not saying that at all. They simply may be parents that are deeply grieved, wounded, and hurt that the children they raise rejected their Christianity. And that may be the whole story. But read how many times in these pop star families you have born-again Christians, evangelical Christians in the mix. In Cyrus's family, there's a big thing with born-again Christianity. And then you have this satanic element. In Katy Perry's family, her father was an evangelical minister. And Katy Perry is either in Satanism or witchcraft. So you don't really, it's always confusing. And at the very least, I believe that they delight in corrupting the image of a healthy evangelical Christian family. That they're targets. Now, let's go back to Manson. I mean, we've just touched the surface here. Manson is talking about stuff, okay? And I want you to pay attention very closely, because this guy is not flat out crazy. He is claiming to hear subliminal messages while on LSD, listening to the Beatles' White Album, specifically the song Helter Skelter, in which Manson claims he heard coded messages. Okay, if you read my book, A Prophecy of the Future of America, if you read Mass Awakening, which goes into this in great detail, and especially if you read the brand new book, Conquering the Matrix, I go into detail, facts, history, examples in a fast-moving way. And I talk about things like the Tavistock Institute, a British intelligence-related secret organization that Sigmund Freud helped found. And Sigmund Freud, the father of psychoanalysis, was a complete fraud, man. The whole theory of psychoanalysis was People criticize L. Ron Hubbard for inventing a religion. Look, let me tell you something. Sigmund Freud's theory of psychoanalysis, Freud was high on snorting cocaine most of the time. Okay? He made that whole theory up right out of the top of his head. So it's absolutely ludicrous for people who are in psychoanalysis, etc., to criticize Scientology and L. Ron Hubbard. Because the truth is, what they promote as science is science fiction. Now, then Manson, and by the way, Manson was a Scientologist for a while. That means nothing necessarily. He was also up there at the Esalen Institute, which was this New Age think tank, but it was also a front for sophisticated mind control. People like Aldous Huxley spoke there, and many others. Okay, so then Manson says that he's hearing these messages from the White Album about race wars, helter-skelter, subliminal messages while he's taking LSD. Now, let's go back to the formula that L. Ron Hubbard was the first to expose, and many scientists, in addition to Hubbard, have come forward with this. The basic formula for scientific mind control is pain, drugs, and hypnosis. The Tavistock Institute, and I document it, I detail this in Conquering the Matrix, Mass Awakening, and A Prophecy of the Future of America. The Tavistock Institute are connected to the Illuminati. They use scientific mind control to create the 1960s, 1970s counterculture in America. The sex, drugs, rock and roll counterculture of the 70s was created by the Tavistock Institute, a mind control institute in Great Britain. And the whole free love, feminism, that entire counterculture 60s, 70s scene was all created by scientific mind control scientists at the Tavistock Institute, who were using the principles of Aldous Huxley, countless other scientists like Dr. Gregory Bateson. And then when the Nazi mind control scientists came into the United States, they were given like a blank check to spend as many billions of dollars they needed to develop scientific mind control. So during the 60s and the 70s, what happened? The rock and roll generation was bombarded with hearing the same albums, the same hit songs over and over and over again. No matter which radio station they switched to, they would all be playing the same 10 or 15 songs per day that were on some kind of hit parade or countdown list. Okay, so young people that are smoking dope, taking LSD, doing drugs, either have vinyl albums or they're listening to the radio where they're all over the country tuning into the exact same songs. What is that? That's repetition, repetitive lyrics going into the subconscious over and over again. Repetitive lyrics that you can actually hear but don't necessarily make sense to your conscious mind, although you can repeat them, but they program your subconscious mind. And then you have the subliminal messages that you can't hear that go right into your subconscious. Okay, this is classical scientific mind control. And then you have pain. Well, what was the pain? The pain was America was shattering. President John F. Kennedy got his head blown off on national TV. People saw the horrors of the Vietnam War and the body bags coming back. Martin Luther King Jr. was gunned down outside of his hotel room. I mean, there was all kinds of chaos. That's pain. That's trauma. That's manufactured crisis. Then you have them, they promoted LSD. Tens of millions of free doses of LSD were distributed all across America. LSD, it's interesting, at the core of the counterculture is the exact drug, LSD, which is the central factor in scientific mind control. MK Ultra, centered on LSD. Monarch mind control centers on LSD. Strange that LSD is being distributed all across America, while other principles of modern mind control are being deployed, such as repetitive lyrics, subliminal messaging, and pain. Why LSD? Because what's going on in reality is the sex, love, rock and roll generation was a generation programmed by scientific mind control. Repetition, that's what Aldous Huxley said. He said it over and over again in his writings, that you can program people subliminally by repetition of hypnotic suggestions, programming them. And what were they doing in Tavistock? Why were they using scientific mind control? They were using scientific mind control because they wanted to destroy Christianity, a belief in the biblical God, the Christian marriage institution, Christian morality, absolute right, absolute wrong, and patriotism and nationalism. Those were the targets, and still are the targets, of the Illuminati and the Marxists and the communists today. The same targets. So they use scientific mind control to demonize and destroy in the minds of tens of millions of young people, to discredit Christianity, to destroy any belief in a traditional Christian marriage, to promote free sex, because that has heavy-duty psychological severing mechanisms to Christian morality. Get rid of Christian morality, get rid of patriotism, nationalism, and promote worship in a pagan god, a Luciferian god, sex, drugs, and rock and roll. And they're still at it. That's why these people are raised up. Now let's read Manson again. He said he heard these messages. Now, okay, so when I first heard that, and for most of my life, I thought, well, you know, Manson was crazy, because that's what the media told me to believe. He's whacked out on LSD, stumbling around in the desert. Of course he's hearing subliminal messages of helter-skelter in the desert, because he's flat out crazy. And he's got a swastika tattoo in his forehead, and so do his followers. He's nuts. That's what I thought, like probably most of you. Then I realize perhaps he's not that crazy. Perhaps he went through MK Ultra. Now, these are abstract clues. They don't prove anything. For the sake of integrity, I'm not using these clues as a means to prove what I'm asserting. They raise serious questions that lead us to potential proof further down the road. So in A Prophecy of the Future of America, I talk about what Manson was doing. He said he heard coded messages from the White Album while on drugs. That's exactly what the Tavistock Institute was doing. They had subliminal messages in the rock and roll music, and they played them over and over again while the kids were high on LSD and pot. The Beatles lyrics, you know, smoke pot, everybody smoke pot, you know. That's out right in your face. Why don't we do it in the road? I mean, you know, Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds, on and on and on. So was Manson just raving mad when he said he heard coded messages coming from the White Album? Perhaps not. Perhaps Manson remembered how he was programmed, and perhaps Manson knew, because Manson was a musician, by the way. He didn't succeed, but he was a musician. He wanted to be a pop star. That's why he was recording with the Beach Boys. And so, was he crazy when he claimed to hear these messages? I don't know. I'd say this is a big question mark, because let's take it further. Manson believed that he and his followers would escape the chaos, and Manson describes helter-skelter as a kind of psychological race war between racial groups that is not necessarily a physical war, but it's a psychological rage war, all right? And there's total anarchy, and America is like crashing and burning. And Manson is receiving these coded messages while taking drugs and listening to Helter Skelter. And he's hearing, like psychically, that he and his followers would escape the chaos through a hole that went deep underground in Death Valley into another world until the Helter Skelter was over. Okay, now just think about this. We have, in my book, A Prophecy of the Future of America, I have a partial list of the major military bases and giant cities built deep under the earth to help the elite, the military, and the president, etc., survive a nuclear attack or total chaos. Okay, I list the major military bases. They're all, in Russia, under Black Mountain, the size of their underground city that a nuke can't break through is like massive beyond belief. And we have underground cities and underground fortresses all over the United States, like in Colorado and all over the place. So in my book, A Prophecy of the Future of America, I list these major bases and where they are, like what is under the airport in Denver International Airport. There is something massive under that baby. I don't know what it is. Look at the paintings in the lobby of the airport. It's all apocalyptic. Now, Manson, why is it that what Manson is warning about appears to be identical to what the military in the major superpowers are actually constructing deep under the earth? You're listening to the Paul McGuire Report. I'm Paul McGuire. Visit paulmcguire.us. By the way, you can join me tomorrow, even if you're listening to me right now, in North Hollywood at the Garland Hotel. We have our Paradise Mountain Church meetings. The meetings are free, but you need to pre-register by visiting paulmcguire.us. That's paulmcguire.us. I have a powerful prophetic message from the Word of God about what is happening in America and the future, and how you can not be like disconnected from it, but how God can supernaturally give you the resources to be an overcomer and to be used by God in a way that you probably never anticipated. Because even though things are going crazy in the world, those people that are drawing close to God are getting stronger. God's giving them wisdom. He's amplifying their talents and abilities, and you'll never read about it in the news media. But there is the beginnings of a very significant surge among God's people, where those Christians who are truly following the Lord, who are prioritizing Bible prophecy, who have a burden for America or whatever nation that they live in, the Lord is supernaturally raising them up. He's supernaturally giving them favor. He's blessing their endeavors, their entrepreneurial dreams, their jobs. He's answering their prayers at an unprecedented level. Why? It's really simple, because Jesus Christ said we're to preach the gospel into every nation in the world. We're to make disciples of all nations. But Jesus Christ said before his return, we are to occupy until he comes. And so those believers that are faithful to be occupying, God anoints and backs up. Now, another translation of that verse, which says, occupy until I come, by Jesus, it is translated, Jesus Christ says, do business until I come. So those believers who are being faithful to do business until Christ returns, they are receiving the benefits, the rewards, the blessing. Why? Because they're obeying God. They're doing business until he comes. Now, what kind of business is that? Kingdom business. What is kingdom business? It's winning people to Jesus Christ, winning souls. It's making disciples of all nations. It's occupying the land that you've been given to occupy. And it's doing business until he comes, winning souls, spreading the gospel. And when a person, a believer, is not like self-centered, but truly, truly in their hearts is putting God first. It's a simple principle, but very rarely followed. When a believer puts God first, you know, we say Jesus is Lord. Is he really Lord? You say you believe that Jesus Christ is God, which means you believe that Jesus Christ is Lord, right? But do you really? And let me challenge you, because the same challenge would be applied to me. We're all accountable. Can you honestly say that Jesus is Lord of my life? Now, before you answer, ask yourself these questions. If Jesus Christ is Lord of my life, as I claim, then my primary purpose in living would be to serve my Lord Jesus by doing the things that he asked me to do. In other words, if you work for a boss or a manager or a CEO or whatever, okay, how do you please your boss? How do you get a pay raise? How do you get promoted? Generally speaking, among other things, the person that listens carefully to what the boss, the manager, the CEO, the district supervisor, or whatever, the person that listens carefully to what that person in authority is demanding of you, like instructions. I want you to increase sales. I want your customer approval ratings to go up. I want you to raise your annual profit by 1.5%. I want you to take the $15,000 and launch your homegrown entrepreneurial business and generate enough money to at least pay back the 50% of the $15,000 investment. I want you to reconcile your relationship with your husband or wife or whatever. Okay? So if Jesus is your Lord, you're going to do what he prioritizes. And what does Jesus prioritize? He says, win souls for Jesus Christ, make disciples of all nations, occupy the land until he comes, and do business until I come. Occupying the land for Americans means take the time to study the Word of God and history and learn that America has a special purpose. It was founded by the Pilgrims and Puritans who entered into a covenant with God based on Deuteronomy chapter 28, where God made a covenant with the children of Israel, and they would be blessed above all the nations of the world, and it was conditional on that they would worship the true God only, not worship idols, and that they would diligently hearken and obey the voice of the Lord or the word of the Lord. Okay? And that's why America became a great nation. Now we're under danger and serious threat, more serious than you have any idea. The potential of illegally and non-constitutionally subverting from within our present form of government and taking out our president or creating a fake manufactured crisis to declare martial law and suspend the Constitution is a very real and clear and present danger. Just look what's going on. Lawlessness like you've never seen before. Lying everywhere by the media. I mean, just completely destroying people's reputations over lies. Some of them are true, but for every one that's true, there's there's political assassination, so to speak, based on complete lies. Now, does God want his remnant people who claim to call Jesus Lord? God has a special plan for America. That's why he gave us a Constitution and a Bill of Rights. Does God expect his people to sit by, being passive, apathetic, non-involved? No. If you're a Christian and you don't have a burden for your nation, and if you're not willing to do everything you can to spiritually occupy until he comes, then you're part of the problem. Because by your apathy, by your disengagement, by your non-involvement, you are actually empowering the enemies of the gospel to destroy America. That is a grievous sin. America has a key plan to play in the last days. I don't care who taught you what, whoever taught you what, whatever caused you to believe America does not have a critical role in the last days, and that is your justification for being apathetic. Let me tell you something. You either didn't understand what that person was teaching you, or you sat under some kind of false teacher. Because the evidence is irrefutable that God's hand has been upon America since its beginning, and God has a plan for America in the last days. And in order for that plan to happen, you and I have to obey the call that God is giving us. None of us have the right to sit in the grandstands and eat popcorn and Cracker Jacks or whatever, hot dogs or whatever. All right? I know Dodger dogs are good. And thank God the baseball players are honoring our country. But I'll tell you what, I have no patience for any man or woman who's spending their hard-earned money to pay for tickets to an NFL game where either one of the teams has players that are kneeling as we're honoring our country. I mean, I have more respect for the guys that are rebelling and refusing and kneeling. I have more respect for them, even though I think they're crazy and they have no clue about what they're talking about. Talk about being mind-controlled zombies. They're the poster boys. They have no clue what they're advocating. But I have more respect for them than I do any man, especially men and women, who would take their hard-earned money. And it's not that you can't go to football games and enjoy yourself, but you have no business going to a football game when you know that some of the key players, or any of the players, are going to be on their knees or disrespecting our Constitution and the American way of life. And you're paying to see the game? You're worse than they are. You ought to, if you're hearing me, you ought to be ashamed of yourself. You ought to literally fall on your face, put your face into the carpet right now. I'm dead serious, man. I have no respect for you. I'm not going to tell you that in person, but that's what I think privately. So don't come up and tell me unless you're telling me you repented. God, I'll forgive you. But look, man, you are empowered. You're financing it, the destruction of your own country. You ought to get down with your face in the carpet and ask God to forgive you. He will. And then repent over taking your hard-earned money and financing the destruction of our nation. And take that money and give it to a ministry that you believe is preaching and communicating the truth. I'm serious. What did it cost you for those tickets? Whatever it cost you for those tickets, or annual tickets. Now, I don't want to get into it. I mean, if you're locked in and you can't get out, okay, that's a different story. But you have no business being there. If you can't not attend a football game to save your country, then really, I have nothing to say to you. This is kind of fleshly on my part, but really it annoys me. Okay, now, so, by the way, in terms of scientific mind control and programming, what those players are doing in rebelling from America is they've been programmed to do that. So the Illuminati and other secret groups have perfected scientific mind control. And they have people who have multiple personalities and alter personalities, program personalities. Now, I cannot conclusively prove what I'm saying, okay? But as I'm observing what's happening in the media and what's happening in our culture, I'm seeing patterns emerge which lead me to believe, I call it a working theory because I'm an author and a researcher. So I'll call it a working theory up until the time I get final proof. And when I get final proof, or at least proof that I believe is powerful enough to support my theory, I won't call it a theory, I'll call it my belief or a fact. But my working theory is, based on my research and my observation, is that there is a significant percentage of people, men and women of various ages, in the music industry, in the entertainment industry, in the media industry, in politics, in sports, cultural icons and others, authors, all right, who have gone through scientific mind control. They don't probably even know it, but they have been programmed to function as superstars and personalities, which means their talent was developed. And the purpose is that they will vocalize and live a lifestyle and hold and promote political viewpoints that the Illuminati want promoted to the masses. In other words, people follow cultural heroes. So I believe there's a significant percentage of cultural so-called heroes and stars and performers, etc., in our nation and around the world today, which are deliberately have been put through some kind of monarch mind control. And their entire purpose is to be like salespeople, to model, to represent and sell a new world order, sexual anarchy, believing in Satanism, practicing the occult, etc., etc. So you're looking at people that have been deliberately raised up to function in that purpose, because that's a form of peer pressure, which is a form of scientific mind control. Now, I'm not going to name names because I could get into serious trouble, but I think it's more than unusual and highly conspicuous that what we have this this wave of like radical transgenderism, okay, where people do complete sex change operation or whatever. Now, I'm not saying this to put down or demonize or speak less of anybody because of sexuality. It's not that I don't have a biblical moral viewpoint. I do. And my viewpoint is biblical, period. But I don't believe that gives me the right to attack, bully, or you know, make it like a personal crusade against somebody for that. I don't think that's right. But it doesn't mean that I believe nothing, and I'm not willing to speak out on things. But when I look at the strange relationship between, let's call them superstar reality TV show families, and the behavior, the whole world, like the Kardashians, okay, the whole world is watching them. Everything they do, okay, they're watching. Yet I see this odd, irregular behavior that reminds me of scientific mind control. I'm not saying conclusively that it is, but it reminds me of that because they're a role model to the world. And so you have this superstar male athlete, Bruce Jenner, who becomes Caitlyn Jenner. Now, again, this is not to pick on people that undergo that change or transformation. I just find it very conspicuous that Bruce Jenner, who was a superstar athlete, okay, and then becomes involved in this monster media sensation family, the Kardashians, okay, all of a sudden then has this operation, which essentially promotes to untold more millions of people. It acts, in effect, as a promotion of that lifestyle, okay? Nobody in the Kardashians, actually, the truth of the matter is there are born-again Christians in the Kardashian family and in their older members of their family that are no longer here on earth. There's a strong Christian thing. So if you are honestly portraying the Kardashian family, you would show that, but they're hiding that. So then the other guy, I forgot his name, he's the African-American who was militantly anti-Trump, and then he shows up at Trump's offices, pro-Trump. Well, I'm looking at his his eyes and his behavior, and I'm saying there's something off about this guy. So this is just like theoretical stuff, okay? Why so much bizarre behavior in these superstar media families that are basically fragmenting, and what Dr. Ewan Cameron, one of the most brutal scientific mind-controlled doctors financed by Rockefeller, he was experimenting in a Canadian hospital, and he would subject his patients, women in their 20s or kids or whatever, to unbelievable physical brutality, pain, shock, drugs, hypnosis, rape, torture. It's horrible. And then he would program them. He would erase all of their memories. They couldn't even remember how to talk or basic bathroom functions. He'd erase their brains. He'd give them amnesia walls. Yeah, this is true. I write about it in Conquering the Matrix. It's unpleasant, but you need to know about it because it's something that hasn't stopped. And Dr. Cameron erased entire personalities, and then he would implant entirely artificial or multiple personalities in people, okay? And that's a true story. Now, so you see people that appear to have been programmed to occupy the highest positions in the media. Because notice the uniformity of the commonality of all their political views, all their sexual views. It's all the same. They all have a socialist, they won't admit it, but a communist worldview. They're all super liberal. They all have a totally non-Christian sexual worldview. They totally have a non-Christian marital worldview. They totally have a non-Christian worldview regarding globalism and hating patriotism. And by the way, the Bible clearly promotes nationalism and patriotism. It speaks about it definitively because in Genesis 11, God judges Babylon because of their globalism. All right? So all these people are raised up, like John Lennon was raised up, I believe, to promote the master plan for the elite by conditioning the masses. Okay, so now I want to flip into one other issue because you see, you have to recognize this. These forces are working against you. They block people from accepting Christ. Why do you think it's so tough to win millennials to the Lord? It's because they've been programmed so deeply. So you've got to be more effective with how you reach them. Okay, so I was reading the Drudge Report. This is where it all started. I was reading the Drudge Report, and then on the front page of the Drudge Report, I happened to notice a couple of things. And I'm just going to throw them out to you. On the Drudge Report, I read that Johnny Depp, you know, the actor who did all the Pirates of the Caribbean movies, I read that Johnny Depp is starring in an X-rated Marilyn Manson video with a graphic orgy scene, and he really wants out of Disney movies. Now, first of all, I always thought the appearance of Johnny Depp on the scene was strange. That's neither here nor there. But I'm not going to make a definitive accusation. I'm just going to notice pieces of a potential puzzle. I'm not going to make a statement, okay? Johnny Depp, first of all, Marilyn Manson, who Johnny Depp is making this X-rated Marilyn Manson video with an orgy scene. Marilyn Manson is an open Satanist who produces the most obscene, satanic, dark, and evil and twisted music videos and lyrics and performances. But above all, he's an open Satanist. So the question has to be raised. Why does Johnny Depp want to collaborate with an open Satanist, Marilyn Manson, in an X-rated video with an orgy scene, which, by the way, will find its way into the hands of young children because Johnny Depp is known as that pirate in Pirates of the Caribbean and the Lone Ranger. Okay, so that's very bizarre. Very bizarre. And then my mind reflects on things that Johnny Depp has said over the years. Relationships he's had, places he's been with the Rolling Stones and stuff. And there was a guy who was called, he's a big writer for Rolling Stone who's dead now, Hunter S. Thompson, the gonzo journalist. Now, nothing I'm saying is definitive. I'm simply repeating unproven rumors that people have mentioned. But the gonzo journalist, Hunter S. Thompson, mysteriously died. Supposedly, he says he was assassinated and shot. I think that's how the story goes, in his ranch home in the mountains, hills of Colorado. And then other people said he committed suicide. There was the rumor, I'm not saying it's true, but there was the rumor that somehow he was involved, Hunter L. Thompson was involved in satanic activities. Let's just say it's a rumor. There may be more than that, but I'm not willing to go further than that. So Johnny Depp was a big friend of Hunter L. Thompson. Now, Hunter S. Thompson. Now, Johnny Depp also stars in a movie about Hunter S. Thompson's life. Now, Johnny Depp is working with Marilyn Manson, who is an openly declared Satanist. People have accused Thompson of being in some kind of satanic or occult involvement. And Johnny Depp was friends with him. And so, could there be a pattern here of relationships that involve participation and Satanism? Oh, and there's a lot more to it, but I'm not willing to go there. I'm not willing to go there right now. Because before I say something, I want to have the absolute proof. But all we have to do is look at the number of superstars, pop stars, especially in music, people like Depp and others, who are associated with well-known Satanists, who participate in satanic type activities of perversion, etc. All right? Now, then we have Miley Cyrus. I don't know if she's a Satanist. I have no idea. But there's been very questionable research into her life. And then you have Amanda Bynes locked up, and Lindsay Lohan, who was sober. And then you have all these other artists like Adele, Pink, I guess it's Emily Sandé, Taylor Swift, Katy Perry, Lady Gaga. I mean, what is their common spiritual belief system? I've seen Lady Gaga perform using blatant Illuminati symbolism. You see, I've seen rumors and hints that many of these people are involved, not the people I just mentioned, but are involved in satanic cults. You see, there's something going on beneath the surface. The Bible tells us about this. I urge you to get a copy of Conquering the Matrix. You need to wake up. You need to know what's going on, because guess what? You're a target of scientific mind control. In fact, you are under the influence of scientific mind control in certain areas of your life, and you don't even know it. That's how subtle it is. I don't think you or me or for our children, we want our behavior, our beliefs, our attitudes, our ideas, our identities programmed secretly and covertly. But they are. And the only way we can use the shield of faith that will stop the flaming missiles is to be sober and on the alert and aware of what's going on. I'm asking you to join me in doing just that, making an entire new generation, several generations of new people, and educating as many people as we can of all generations to help them wake up and help them to understand what's really going on before it's too late. Because that's our spiritual duty in Jesus Christ. That's what it means to win people to Christ. That is what it means to make disciples of all nations, and that's what it means to occupy the land spiritually until he comes. People have to be woken up because they're asleep spiritually. They have to be woken up. That's why the Bible talks about the need for a biblical great awakening, a biblical revival. Will you help me do that? We need you to pray and to be prayer warriors for me, my family, and the ministry. We need you to seek the face of God and to be bold in your seeking and ask the Lord, Lord, what can I do to help wake the people up and educate them? How can I help Paul McGuire in this ministry? And go before the Lord and ask him. And he'll speak to you, if you wait on him, about how much you should give. And be willing to be radical and think out of the box. Do whatever the Lord tells you to do. And partner with us so we can produce the television. I have so many things I'm ready to announce that I think will genuinely encourage you. Breakthrough outreach in just amazing ways, what God is doing. But we need your partnership financially because it costs money to buy the studio equipment, the computer technology, the editing, the directors, and everything else necessary. Go to paulmcguire.us, that's paulmcguire.us, and stay tuned as we continue to shine the light in the darkness and proclaim the truth. God bless you. I'm Paul McGuire.